Hey everyone, and welcome to Three Black Women and Their White Coach,
a podcast where we have a conversation around navigating race in the coaching industry.
And we're your hosts.
I'm Catrice Stetson, your mixed race internet bestie and serial entrepreneur who's built multiple businesses from the ground up.
And I'm Brianna Lachelle, your biracial nonprofit coach whose focus is on helping support nonprofit leaders and founders create impact-driven organizations that radically change their communities for the better.
Here at Three Black Women and Their White Coach, we dive into hard conversations centered around racial inequity within the coaching space with softness and grace.
Our hearts are to open up these conversations and create a safe space for people to be seen, learn, and create a better, more inclusive environment for all.
So pull up a chair, your favorite snack, and a bevy while you yap with your new biz besties as we work to make the coaching industry a place where we all feel welcome and respected. Microaggressions might be small by definition, but their impact is anything but. In this episode, we're naming the seemingly harmless comments, actions, and assumptions that chip away at our humanity in coaching spaces, that ultimately lead to us being here right now. We're not just here to share real-life examples, but the origin of both this podcast and mine and Brianna's entire friendship. We're here to explain why this topic hits so hard and talk through what true accountability and repair can look like. So if you've ever thought, but I didn't mean it like that, this one's for you.
As we dive into today's episode on microaggressions, we want to acknowledge the weight of this conversation. We're sharing stories and examples that may feel uncomfortable, and that's okay. Growth often starts with discomfort. But let's be clear, we're not here to drag people or dwell in blame. We don't believe every white coach is causing harm, and we don't believe every Black woman or woman of color is walking around wounded. There's nuance here, and that's exactly what we're holding space for. Our intention is to shine a light on the subtle dynamics that shape our experiences in coaching spaces, not to shame, but to spark awareness and ultimately healing. This is a space for truth told in love, and we're so glad you're here to be a part of it.
So before we dive into this conversation, we want to kind of define what a microaggression is. The term microaggression was coined by Dr. Chester Pierce in the 1970s, but then expanded on by Dr. Daryl Wing Sue in the 2000s. And the definition is a microaggression is a subtle, often unintentional comment or action that communicates bias toward a marginalized group.
And so there's different key types of microaggression. So there can be something called microassaults, which is overt but subtle insults. Things like, you're so articulate for a Black girl. There's things called microinsults, comments that demean a person's background or identity, like, you're not like other Black women I know. Microinvalidations, so statements that erases someone's lived experience, like, I don't see color. And man, what a conversation.
What a conversation we're about to dive into. I don't even know where I want to begin on this one.
Yeah. Do you want to just dive right in on like how we met and we can kind of go through that story?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Where to even begin with the story? So I guess long story short, Brianna and I met while being in a coaching program. We were in a mini-mind, a mastermind. We were in a coaching program, nonetheless, a group program. I had been working with this particular coach for 6 months already prior to we'll call it a cohort that Brianna was in. So that was another 6 months. But Brianna and I really, even though we had spent 6 months in a program together, didn't really get to know each other until basically the last few days of the program while we were on a retreat. So in this particular program, you go through 6 months of coaching. It included one-on-ones, but also group things. So there were calls where Brianna and I were both on a call, but there was never really a time where we were, getting to know each other on a more communal friendship type of level. Right. But then at the end of the 6 months, this coach had structured her program to end with like a celebratory retreat. And that's kind of where we really met and dove deep into who each of us were, our experience with not only this program, but coaching in general. And then there were, of course, and I'll let Brianna kind of dive into this, but things that happened during the course of this retreat that inspired us to be like, you know what, we're ready to kind of speak up and speak out about the things that we've experienced and to provide resources and education to make the space better. But yeah, so now we're here.
Now we're here. Yeah. So obviously, me and Catrice want to be so respectful towards the other people who were in this program and the coach themselves. So we're not going to be diving into like names or specifics that would like out someone. But during this experience, we were met with a, a coach who was very excited, I guess you could say, about the fact that she had so many women of color within her program. And she was kind of wearing the ally banner pretty proud and loud, which is great, which is fine. But the thing that kind of really sparked this conversation between me and Catrice and some of the other ladies at the retreat is how that wasn't showing up and like the way that she was communicating with us, with the things that she was doing, with the microaggressions we were experiencing right then and there. And so that really led us to be like, oh, I thought I was just being sensitive. Like, so to kind of set the scene, me, Catrice, and another one of the women who was at this group retreat, we were all from out of town. There was a couple of other people there. And then the coach was actually, we were in her hometown. So her home was there. And so when we got there, we found out that it was just going to be me, Catrice, and another person staying in the Airbnb, that the coach was going to commute in and out. And so after the first night, we were all kind of sitting and chatting, and, you know, Catrice was kind of stirring the pot a little bit, asking questions like, oh, you know, do you think you're going to resign? Like, what's your experience been like? And we just kind of like dived into this conversation of like, oh, I don't know, probably not. And in my case, and with Catrice, she had already committed to signing up, and the other person that we were with had committed to signing up, and they were asking me questions like, why aren't you resigning? And I was like, you know, I'm just having a hard time. Like, I just don't think our personalities mesh. Like, she kind of like hurts my feelings a little bit, and just like some of the ways that she talks, some of the things that she does. And I think it's just like not a good fit, not a good investment for me moving forward. And then as I was kind of talking and sharing, they were like, I thought that was just me. I thought that I was being sensitive. I thought that XYZ was happening. And then as we started like actually sharing like our experiences and realized that like, oh, this might actually be a problem. This isn't just us being in our heads. That's really where this was kind of born, to start having conversations with other women of color and other women in the coaching space about what it means to experience life as a Black woman, as a woman of color, in coaching spaces that are traditionally very white, and how the impact of things that people say, things that people do can change like how we experience a coaching program, the growth we're able to have, and even our own self-confidence on us thinking that maybe we're just the problem when in reality there's actual legitimate things happening that probably shouldn't. And so that's kind of where this dream podcast was born.
Yeah. And as we were having these conversations, so I think we were there for 3 nights.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were there for 3 nights, and of course, I am someone, if you meet me in person, I'm just someone who, there is no small talk. There is no like, oh, like, what do you do for work? What's your favorite color? What do you think of the weather? I'm very like, just dive right in. And so that first night I was like, oh, and I, like Brianna said, I had already signed for another 12 months for this program. And I will admit that during the first 6 months that I had worked with this coach, I had seen a lot of success in my business, which then got me to sign up for another 6 months. And then I had sat kind of on this teeter-totter of feeling like my time with this coach had kind of expired, where I wasn't getting the same results that I was getting during that first round. But there were little things that kept coming up where I was like, oh, maybe I still need this coach. But then there were also experiences that I was having, you know, and again, we were having these, all of us, like Brianna and I, and then other gals who were part of this program, were having experiences during this program throughout the 6 months that none of us were aware of until we were on the retreat. And so as I was having these experiences and I would be talking to my fiance about them, he'd be like, "Oh, like that does seem kind of off," but like him not being an entrepreneur didn't really turn on any red flags for him. And so as we were on this retreat and we started diving in that first night into one, especially this big topic of Brianna not resigning and why was she not resigning, and kind of dissecting her experience and then finding out that I had very similar experiences, and the other gal who was staying at the Airbnb with us was also having some similar experiences. We were kind of like, wait, may like Brianna said, maybe we aren't crazy. And I had spent so much time sitting in this place of being like, oh, like maybe I'm just being sensitive. Maybe, maybe it's not that big of a deal. And I'd kind of talked it up, and I will admit that there were some blurred lines between the coach and I in terms of like coaching relationship, like client to coach, and also friendship. And so that was also this really hard line to walk where I was like, when I was feeling uneasy about the program, feeling like I couldn't really talk about it because I also didn't want to lose my friend. But kind of
Yeah.
has, like we talked about in the first couple episodes where I'd mentioned this, where growing up in predominantly white spaces, making a lot of white friends, there was so many things that just went over my head, or like microaggressions or micro insults or things that would be said to me that I would know that it would feel uneasy and uncomfortable, but I couldn't really name why it felt uncomfortable. And it never, prior to this retreat and talking specifically with Brianna, I never called it out as being like, oh, that was a microaggression. And the
Mhm.
reason I feel uneasy is because of my skin tone and them being white. Like me being a person of color and this person's white, and they're saying something that doesn't feel right, but also feels socially accepted around everyone else in the group when I'm the only person of color. So that had happened, and we had this really, really long talk. I think we stayed up till like 5 a.m. that first night.
We were so tired.
We were so tired the next day, but we
Yeah.
stayed up and there was just so much to unpack. And then as we unpacked all of that, and it kind of felt like we had reached this point of like resolve within ourselves, like we felt like we all were heard and seen and validated, like we could just kind of keep on going. Like Brianna was very steadfast in that she wasn't resigning. I was like, yeah, I'm going to keep being part of this program. I had worked it out. I was prepared to have a conversation with the coach and kind of be like, hey, these are some things that I think could use some improvement, during this next round. And then day 2 of the retreat happened. And I think that is like when everything began to truly crumble. Brianna, do you
Fall
want to kind of
apart.
talk about what all went down on that second day?
Ugh. So day 2 is when I drove
Yep.
to that second location. Okay, so there was just a lot of things going on, and it was very obvious to us that this coach felt kind of frustrated that we had been up all night chit-chatting. And I don't really understand why, because in reality, like Catrice is kind of saying, we didn't have like we hadn't formed friendships. We really hadn't gotten to know each other before this point. So it was really, I in my opinion, I thought it was kind of nice for us to get to have a chance to like sit and chat and hang out. And then obviously like that coach was welcome to stay with us and hang out and be a part of those conversations, and for whatever reason she chose not to, which was also fine. And so I kind of started the day a little slower than maybe we originally had planned. But I also want to preface that this coach had let us know that this weekend was for us, so that she had a few tentative plans on the books for things for us to do, but it was always changeable based on what we wanted to do. Like it was never set in stone. She was very open to like, hey, like we could do X, Y, and Z, but if that doesn't sound fun to someone, we can change it. That person can stay, whatever. So I also want to just throw out into the ether that we weren't like derailing her trip by any means. Like we stayed respectful. We tried to stay to her timelines, but we were all kind of dragging because, like she said, We were up until 5 a.m. chit-chatting. I don't think I've yapped like that since like I was a teenager, which was also so heartwarming for me. I think it's really special when people of similar backgrounds are able to be in rooms and safe spaces with each other, and like the type of healing and connection that can really happen. So that was really good. I'm feeling good. I'm feeling excited. I knew that there was just something in my gut that was like, you're not going to resign. This isn't an investment that's like paying off for you. Like, we're not going to keep paying to feel uncomfy. And there was never like a direct moment that I was like, ooh, I don't like this, right? Um, but there was just little things, little microaggressions that, like Catrice was saying, like I couldn't ever put my finger on it, and it was never like I could blatantly be like, "Bro, what was that?" But it was just this feeling that I continued to get. Like I would sometimes dread getting on coaching calls, or like there was just like, I think for me it was a lack of her understanding what my brand voice was, what my approach to coaching was. It was a lot softer and more relationship than she was teaching. And that's like not a diss. Like she's a very successful coach, and I love that that works for her, but it didn't work for me. And then when I went against that, it kind of caused some clash, I think. I felt pretty set. I was still like open-minded to the fact that like if this weekend happened and it changed my whole perspective, I was still had the ability to resign, but I was about 90% sure that I wasn't resigning. And so we get to like the second day where we're waiting for an Uber. The Uber's not showing up. We're about to miss an appointment at the second location that we're going to. And so I had driven up from my home. And so my car was there, and she was like, "Can we just ride in your car?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." So Catrice hopped in the front seat with me. Everybody else was in the back. I'm driving to the location, and this like conversation about Catrice and her wedding pops up, and some things were said. And I immediately, I'll let Catrice share exactly if she wants to in a minute, but some things were said. And I immediately was like, oh, that's a weird thing to say. And it's like the whole car kind of got silent. And I was like, it was a weird thing to say. I'm just saying. It was almost inappropriate. Like, Catrice, do you want to share more about
Yeah.
like that
So
experience
to
knowledge up?
set the scene even more, so Brianna's driving, and a song, she's playing a playlist that I'm pretty sure her husband had made for her, which it was so
Yes.
lovely. I love when a man puts together a playlist. Like I love it
Yes.
so much. And the song came on, and Brianna was like, "Oh my gosh, Catrice, like you should add this to your wedding playlist." And I was like, "Oh my gosh,
Mhm.
like what's the name of the song and everything?" And this coach from the back seat is all like, "Oh well, Catrice needs to learn how to dance like a white person first because she's marrying like a white guy." And Brianna like didn't like a full like turnaround, but obviously she was driving us, so safety. But she just was like kind of clocked it, and I
In the
sat there
rearview mirror.
silent. I sat there silent because I just was like, I don't even know how to respond to this. And Brianna jumped to my defense, and it was just one was like first question that I think came out of her mouth was, "Why would you say that? Like, what makes you say that?" And
Yeah.
then Brianna also asked, what does white person dancing look like? And then stated, why, since it was a wedding, why not us come together and like, it should be some combination of both of our, I'm going to say
Cultures.
cultures.
Yeah.
But the coach was fumbling on her words when Brianna clocked it. And again, I sat there quiet because I just was again, sitting in this really weird spot of coach client relationship, but also friend. And why would my friend, like someone who I consider a friend, say that? And as she was trying to construct a response to Brianna, the coach was like, "Oh, well, like line dancing." And if you know anything, like if you follow me on social media, if you know anything about, like, if there's one thing to know about my husband, Reese, because at this point, when this episode is dropping, he will be my husband. So crazy, less than 13 days away. But if there's one thing to note, that man does not like country music. I have to pull teeth to listen to like just the older Taylor Swift albums. And I'm a diehard Swiftie. I love Taylor Swift. If I want to listen to something like Debut Fearless, I'm yanking Reese's teeth out because this man, you might as well think that this man is bleeding from his ears. He is always questioning why I want more cowgirl boots. I love a good pair of cowgirl boots. But for her to then be like, "Oh, line dancing is white dancing." It was like, "You know who I'm marrying?" That doesn't even like it
Mesh.
invalidates your comment even more. Like, why would you say that?
Yeah. Yeah. And so like so from my perspective, I'm driving and like we're listening to music, we're sharing this cute playlist that my husband made. And I was really excited because I was like, "Oh, this is one of the songs that we listened to when I was getting ready. You should put it on your playlist. Like, have you started your playlist?" And so we're chit-chatting. And then that comment comes from behind my seat and I immediately look at Catrice out the corner of my eye, look in my rearview mirror at said coach, and I was like, "Why would you say that? What do you mean by that?"
No,
And
literally
it was
exactly like that. The way they
what?
exactly like that, the full cadence and everything.
Yeah, like what did you mean by that? Just really curious. And it was like the whole car froze. Like I felt like the tension rise up, and immediately I was like, "Ooh, maybe I shouldn't have said that." But like that wasn't cool. And like I also want to say that like sometimes it's so much easier recognizing things like that from when you're like the outside looking in, right? Like obviously that was directed towards like Catrice, but when I heard it and I saw it, it immediately like felt wrong in my own body. And I had been reading and like kind of exploring this for myself of like how to respond to instances where like microaggressions are a part or I'm feeling like discriminated against or something like that. And like one of the top resources that I had been told was to ask people to explain what they mean. So that way I had clarity because it was also an opportunity for them to be like, "Oh, I meant XYZ," and they us realize that there was just a misunderstanding or a miscommunication. But it also was like a non-confrontational way of pointing out like, "Hey, should you have really said that? That sounded like an inside thought," you know? And so trying to figure out how to navigate, okay, like that wasn't cool. I don't want to be confrontational. We're literally about to go to a spa and hang out. I don't want beef, but also I'm not going to allow that type of negativity in my vehicle. And so it was like this kind of tension for me of trying to figure out, okay, like am I overstepping? Was that wrong of me to ask that question? But then feeling like really validated after like seeing Catrice like kind of like trying to internally figure out, and I'm like, "Oh no, that hurt her feelings. We should like talk about it. So like tell me what you meant. Like let's talk it through so we can figure out why this is thing." Especially because over breakfast we were talking about allyship. We were talking about how cool it was that, you know, she had so many women of color in her coaching program and how she was standing up for people of color and women of color and Black people. And so it was also a way for me to point out to her, like, "Hey, true allyship is also changing how we treat people, even if your intentions wasn't bad. Even if you didn't mean it offensively, it was still offensive." And I was hoping that she would take accountability for the fact that she said something that she shouldn't have. And I think that that's an opportunity that we can all, like, as women of color and Black women, I think a lot of times we try not to be confrontational. We try not to be the angry Black woman. And it felt more freeing to, instead of responding with like frustration or like anger, to actually create a dialogue of like, "Why would you say that? Like, what made you say that? Why do you think that way? What what is your thought process on this, to like actually have a conversation to try to understand, and to also show them that like, hey, maybe this pattern of thought that you have is hurtful, and so next time we can do it differently. So yeah, that was like the beginning of our day. Yeah.
No, and then I think that what it was crazy because prior to, and again, blurred lines, and I now can see so clearly how lines were blurred, and it was very, I very much sit in this situation where now that I'm outside of it, I can see because I'm no longer friends with this person. I'm no longer in the coaching program, and being on the outside, looking back at this, and we had kind of, Brandon and I talked about this in episode 2, but talking about like, what makes someone feel comfortable saying something to you, or maybe it was episode 1. It was one of the episodes if you listened.
We'll
Um,
listen.
but talking about, what makes someone feel comfortable saying something to you. And I think that microaggressions is such a it feels like a paper cut when you like put hand sanitizer on, like you don't realize it's there until it's like there, and then it stings and it hurts. But it's
Yeah.
also reaching this point of being, I had to sit with myself on this retreat, and I felt, I'm going to be completely honest, and I don't think that I've told Brianna this, but like I felt so embarrassed and so guilty throughout the
Mm.
course of the retreat and the conversations that we had, knowing that there were times where I definitely could have spoke up against this coach in in both a coaching setting but also a friendship setting, to set more of a precedent of how I should be treated and how others should be treated. Um and so after this big incident in the car, cuz we had this massive conversation during breakfast about allyship, and prior to the retreat, the coach had been talking to me about how excited she was and kind of how she was going to use it as a marketing tactic, for lack of better words, to try to sell more people into the program. That there were so many people of color and that so many people of color trusted her. But after the car ride and things, only from there, like, I mean,
Spiraled.
outside of just microaggressions and race allyship issues and all this stuff and white saviorism, which we will talk about on the next episode, there were so many issues that happened. But as at that moment, as I sat in the car, I remember thinking to myself, why? Like, I thought to myself, like, why does she feel so comfortable? And
Mm.
I've had to unpack that since. It's now been over 3 months at this point, and I've been unpacking, like, really looking back and doing the deep reflection and the work within myself to be like, okay, how can I handle a situation different? And it also comes from this place of, wanting friends and wanting to be liked, and feeling so often that I'm always on the outside of the friend group, like sitting, if everyone's in a circle, like I'm there in the circle, but I'm on like the outside of the circle. Um, and so it was hard because as we got out of the car, when we got to the spa, I had time alone with the coach, and there wasn't even a moment of being like, hey, like, I'm sorry if that hurt you, or I didn't mean, like, there wasn't a moment of like really taking accountability
Accountability.
for the fact that what she said was hurtful. I don't even think she realized it. To be completely honest, I don't even think she realized that it was hurtful and couldn't read into Brianna's response. Me not talking, like, she couldn't see my face, but I can only imagine what my face was reading. But then went on to kind of question me about, because she had known that we had stayed up late, and kind of like Brianna said, we were slow, sluggish, but we honestly didn't sleep in very much. I think we were up by 9:30. Like,
Yeah, we got a solid 4 hours of
we
sleep.
got
It
a
was
solid
like
4 hours
trucking
of
it
sleep.
like
Like,
we were
we
college
were,
kids.
and breakfast wasn't ready till like after 11. So there was plenty of time. But she was made aware that we had stayed up really late, and when there was a moment alone with her and I, she started questioning me about what was said during this late night convo. And kind of I had shifted from being like, oh, this is like such a fun trip to being like, I don't want to be here anymore. Like that switch flipped in the car. And then I also felt very protective of Brianna and the other gal who was at the Airbnb who we had stayed up late, where I was like, I'm gonna be straight up, I lied. I did not say what we had talked about. Like I lied because I did not, one, I did not want to deal with the repercussions right then and there. I also didn't think it was fair to me to isolate me and then question me about what was said, because she could have been at the Airbnb with us. And honestly, I would love to see in a parallel universe what that night could have looked like if we had had the conversations that we had with her there. And
Mm,
her being able to sit there and kind of listen to us unpack everything that we did, because that night one conversation was such a healing experience.
yeah.
Like being able to be like, wow, we're not crazy. We're not overly sensitive. Like we are very valid in feeling the way that we do. And so I lied. I can't remember what I came up with, but I felt, and the way that she kind of had approached it was kind of like she wanted me to snitch.
Mm,
And the conversations that we had anytime that we were alone at the spa, this coach and I felt like not only did she want me to snitch, but she wanted me to snitch on Brianna. Because she knew that Brianna wasn't resigning. And I think that that made it very evident to me, kind of the how she treated Brianna the rest of the trip, and she very much treated Brianna from my point of view, like my point of view, my POV, my point of view. Oh my gosh, the internet is ruining my dialogue.
stressing.
But she was treating Brianna like this angry black woman who was being crazy for calling her out when she was saying things, and not even really calling her out. Like I took so much from Brianna's example of just questioning, like, what what makes you say that? Like, like it wasn't even like she was being called out in a, hey, you did something bad, but it was like let's take a moment for reflection and maybe reapproach the situation a little bit differently. But that, put us in this really rocky spot where I also didn't feel like I could really address the issues that I had, because I thought about being like, hey, that hurt my feelings. But she was so like quick to kind of be like, what was talked about? What was said? Did you guys talk about me? Those types of things that were kind of like, oh, now we're on the defense. Like I felt like it was
Mhm.
me, Brianna, the other girl at the Airbnb versus this coach. And like that's not even really what it was. But that's what
Yeah.
it felt like in that moment, where I was like, I don't feel comfortable telling you that, you know, we feel that we're just like token black girls.
For the marketing. Yeah. Yeah. And it felt very evident to me that there was frustration that I wasn't resigning. I think that like this coach really felt confident that once I got in the room and I heard everybody else was signing, and she was talking about what they were doing next and all the cool things that was going on, that it was going to convince me, or that I would feel some type of pressure to be like, okay, yeah, fine, I'll sign up too. And when it became very clear that that wasn't going to happen, it did feel very much like, oh, then I don't want you here. And I don't know if that's how she actually felt. That was like my experience of it. That could have not been her intention, but intent isn't always per- perception. And so just because you intend good things, just because you don't mean to hurt someone's feelings, just because you weren't actively trying to hurt someone, that doesn't take away the fact that maybe you did. And that's really where like microaggressions really come into play, is that when we say things or when we do things that impact someone else, and then we're not accountable to that when it's brought to our attention, then we perpetuate that, like, that person isn't a part of the group. That person isn't welcome in your space unless they show up and accept whatever it is that you're giving them. And so for like the coaches and clients that are listening, I think that it's really important that when people start, I don't know, asking questions like, what did you mean by that? That's like our chance to pause, because not everyone approaches it that way. I have been around Black women that will pop off if someone says something mean, which, as they should, queen, because like sometimes like that's a lot, and everybody responds to criticism, everybody responds to hurt in different ways. And if someone pops off, I mean, as long as they're not hurting someone, like, understandable. If somebody gets really curious, like I chose to do, I think that's also an understandable and welcome behavior. But when someone starts questioning, like, hey, where are you coming from? What are you doing? The things that you're saying is hurting me. That's an opportunity for us to take a step back, to kind of leash our defensiveness and to start getting curious with them, and to start really uncovering, like, okay, where does this belief come from? Where are we getting like this perception that a biracial couple, that the Black person has to lean more white dancing, whatever that means, for them to fit in? Why is it a thought that, why isn't the initial thought for you that like they're blending two lives, two cultures, two different types of music tastes? And also, music isn't racial. Like, you don't have to be a certain race to like a certain thing. I think that, like, Catrice's example that Reese hates country music and country is a traditionally white music says a lot. And so having the ability to start questioning where the thought patterns are coming from that leads us to make comments that hurts other people, I think is a really important, like, step that we can start making, and realizing that impact over intent every single time. Just because you intend something doesn't mean that that's gonna land the way that you thought it was, and the impact that you have on someone is more important than the intention that you had when saying it. And so if you hurt someone, I think it's fine to express, hey, that wasn't my intention, but I see why that hurt you. I'm sorry, I'll do better next time. Versus saying like, oh, I didn't mean to do that, and then wiping your hands of the accountability, or not acknowledging it at all and making it out to be like the person who's expressing something to you is crazy or out of line or whatever the case may be, when they are bringing you a very valid concern.
And I think it's like also being willing to sit in the discomfort, because
Yeah.
it's not uncomfortable to be a person of color and to call it out.
Yeah.
And I can also imagine that and I bet there's probably times that I've said microaggressions to someone else. Like, I do not think that I am a perfect person or that Brianna is a perfect person, but I think that they're being willing to sit in that discomfort, because it's so easy for someone to be like, hey, that hurt me, and to step into this space of defense and wanting to protect yourself. And sure, you didn't mean it, but how are things going to be different going forward? And when you say that you didn't mean it like that, do you actually know why it hit the way that it did? Like
Right.
why it had that impact, and being able to sit in the discomfort of it all is how we all get better, is having
Right.
uncomfortable conversations. And I think that if someone, because in this particular situation with this coach, I wasn't in a place, in a mental state. I was in such a fight or flight. Like, I was in straight survival mode throughout the rest of the retreat for a number of reasons outside of microaggressions, because that wasn't the only one that was said, but also like health concerns. And then there was a situation where money was stolen, like, to be fully flat out without diving into it, where money was stolen from me. And so I was in this place where I could not have that conversation right then and there, to kind of be like, you said X, Y, and Z, you did X, Y, and Z, and this hurt. and this is why, and kind of to be able to unpack that. And silence is not consent. I think that is so important. Is just because someone doesn't have that conversation with you right there in the moment doesn't mean that it's okay. Doesn't mean that, it was okay for that moment. And so now when they're ready to talk to you about it, that, that's when it actually matters. Like the microaggressions, the micro insults, like all of the above, they still have impact, even if someone doesn't say it right in the moment. And I was prepared to have that conversation. But everything that followed that microaggression in the car on the way to the spa was just made me just want to get out of there so much faster. And then it took me a long time to be able to just process. And by the time that I had processed it, she was no longer willing to have a conversation.
Yeah.
And I can see why, because, I going from prior to the retreat where she has all these women of color in her program to the retreat's over and at least 2 of the women of color are no longer going to be working with her. I can only imagine that it impacted ego. It probably impacted her view, not just, and this plays into ego, but view of like knowing her as a business owner and kind of the way she had been talking about marketing, the fact that she had so many women of color, it probably derailed some of the marketing plans she probably had. She wasn't willing and ready to have that conversation. And I think that when I find that people in general aren't willing to have that conversation, I think it's because they're not willing to do the reflection and the adjusting and sit in that discomfort. My therapist, time and time again, she always says, Catrice, you got to get comfortable with sitting in the shit. Because sometimes sitting in the shit is where the most work is going to get done. But if you are constantly just trying to move on to the next thing and kind of brush everything else under the rug, like nothing's actually going to get done because the shit's just going to keep piling up.
Yeah.
Just some thoughts.
And I think it was also like really important for me personally, after like having these conversations, after being at the retreat, after like multiple things being done that I wasn't okay with, that I didn't align myself with it, and knowing how she was talking about, how coaching women of color was such a big thing on her mind during that retreat, it became really important to me that I didn't want to associate myself and my business with this coach because of the experience I had. And so then I also had to have really difficult conversations after I left the retreat. Like I left the retreat on a Sunday morning, Monday morning, I had to send some emails and like retract my testimonials, ask her not to use my picture, ask her, to not tie me to any marketing that she was doing because I no longer felt aligned. And I think if you're a person of color or a Black woman listening to this right now, that's one of the best things that you can do if you're experiencing something. If something's happened, if you've decided that, like, it might have been good for a little while, but XYZ thing happened and I no longer can align myself with this person, but you feel like you have no room to wiggle because you've already given the testimonials, you've already signed the contract, you've already done XYZ thing, you're allowed to say no. You're allowed to legally, you're allowed to say, hey, actually, I don't want you to use my likeness. I don't want you to use any testimonials I've given you. Hey, I don't want to continue this contract with you. Like, I might have to pay the cancellation fee. I might have to do whatever else, but I can't continue working with you. I'm no longer able to provide my like money and resources to this thing. And if you're getting to that point, it's probably because you've already tried to have a conversation that didn't go well. So if you've gotten to that point, that's a full sentence. You don't have to explain why to anyone. But if you do want to have a conversation, I think it's also good if that person is open to like reflect and to get feedback, to let them know, hey, like these are things I really loved about your program and these are things that really made me feel uneasy. These are things that I wish we could have done differently. These are things that, XYZ. and leave it as that, because one, you need to protect your peace, you need to protect your interests. It's not okay to pay to be in a room where you feel uncomfortable, and it's okay to start evaluating if you're in spaces that make you feel uneasy because you're being hit with microaggressions, you're being hit with the narrative that you're the angry Black woman when you speak out. It's okay to remove yourself from spaces that are no longer serving you or never served you in the first place. So I think it's important for us to start having those reflections and having like enough love and consideration for ourselves to take ourselves out of rooms, even if they're rooms we really want to be in. Because I think that's also the other big thing, because part of my appeal of working with this coach was I had seen her with other big coaches in the industry. She had worked with people that I was really interested in working with. Her marketing was great. She seemed really successful. Her story was really compelling. And parts of me felt really excited to be in the room with her, to be able to have access to like the level of success that she was saying that she had, to be able to feel like a part of the crew, you know? And so having to take myself out of that room was also really hard. And I think different versions of me would have stayed in just to be able to say that I was in that room, but at what cost, you know? And I think those are also conversations that we have to start having, that like our peace is not worth the cost of being in a room that doesn't want us there, that doesn't respect us, that doesn't honor our investment or our time or our feelings. And we have to get out of this mindset that like, if we can just touch the hem of this coach's, that they're going to be the reason why we make it, like that's just not true. And so often they're giving us tools that can't work for us anyways. So it's like important for us to just start considering like, is this really worth my peace? Is this really worth my investment? And where is my line of when I'm in and when I'm going to say I'm out? What is the allowable discomfort that we're willing to put up with,
If there's anything that I've learned from that program experience, it's like talking to the other people in the program. If you feel like something is uneasy, ask about it. And you don't have to go directly to the coach, because sometimes you just need that reaffirming that you're not crazy, that you're not just sensitive and dramatic, to be able to actually make the decisions that you need to. Because I'd felt this uneasiness for so long that I couldn't tell if it was really me just talking it up in my head or if these were things that were actually happening. And when things would happen and other people could witness it and like then be like, no, Catrice, like that was a microaggression. Like, no, that was like favoritism, or this is that and that. Like you're able to really depict it, but like having conversations and, just about coaching in general. But like a conversation that we had was about a one-off offer that all of us had experienced, where all of us had different experiences with it in terms of like how much time we got, the resources that were given to us, how much we spent on it. Bonkers.
Or if it was a part of our program or not.
Yeah, bonkers. I can't even. But I think that having those conversations can be so big, because then it can really tell you where you are in terms of actual alignment, because what's happening to you may not be happening to someone else, but it could be, or something worse could be happening. And I think that so often it's really scary to cancel a contract. It's a little frustrating. I was really excited to cancel my contract and woke up Monday morning to my contract being canceled for me, being terminated for me, and saying that I was no longer a good fit for the program, which told me essentially that I had rocked the boat too many times while on this trip. Even though I was not as loud as Brianna was about the boat rocking, but also taking, like, I thought it was so cool of Brianna to send that email and be like, I would like you to not use my testimonials or not use my image, because you really never know if you're having this misalignment, this uneasiness how much having your face and your words be used for marketing could put someone else in that situation who is like, especially as a woman of color and being that token black girl. And I'm not saying that this coach was using us as that, but at the same time, some of the words that she was using, some of the things that were said did make us feel, at least I don't know
Uneasy.
about you, Brianna, but like I definitely felt like a token black girl. I also felt like a token black friend. And that like I thought it was so big because you just never know. And when I'm definitely someone who I look at the diversity of a program, I look at the diversity of clients. And if you don't feel like someone's aligned or they're saying some off color shit to you, it could be actually really harmful to have your face attached to something.
Yeah. Yeah. Because then it also makes people, it keeps people trapped almost to see like other women of color in this program and saying how great it was, how good it helped them. And then if you're in the same situation and you're feeling like, oh, something's not right, SOS, then it perpetuates this idea that it's all in our head, that we're the problem, that, if we just tried hard enough, if we just wasn't so sensitive, if we just whatever, if we just went with the flow, then our like results would be better. And that might not be the case. And so I think it's just important for us to make sure that we're aligned with the things that we put out into the world and that we can feel proud to refer someone. Like if you wouldn't feel proud or excited to have your best friend hop in with you, then maybe that's not a good alignment. I also want to like piggyback off of what Catrice was saying. One of my biggest regrets of the whole program was not getting to like be friends with Catrice and some of the other women sooner. Like the retreat was so bonding and so positive, and like we didn't just sit up and talk all like we weren't just comparing stories all night. We were talking about our business, we were talking about our lives, our families. We sat and workshopped each other's businesses and gave each other tips and talked about like, oh, this future nonprofit that might be built. And we talked about, hey, how do you do marketing, Brianna, because you have 4 toddlers and you're running around crazy. And just it was so helpful. And like I think the beauty of a group program is having space to work with other like-minded people and get support that your coach can't give you, because your coach is one person. If you're in a group with more than one person, like they can't give you all of their attention. And that's the beauty of a group coaching program. And I'm not saying that like this coach intentionally kept us from each other, but in my opinion, there wasn't a lot of emphasis on like community building. And because there wasn't an emphasis on community building, I feel like all of us that was having these problems stayed stuck for a lot longer, and we felt more alone than we had to, versus if we were like in a group where like community building was a focus. And so I think that's also like a good check for us as coaches, that if you're running a program and you're afraid for your clients to talk to each other, that's a red flag, bro. You're doing something wrong. Like, why are you afraid for your clients to talk to each other? And what do you need to do to adjust? I think as a coach, if you start a group program, then community should be a focus for you. It doesn't have to be the biggest focus, but you should create opportunity for people to find their new friends, to find business partners, to do co-working collaboration stuff. And that's not a bad thing, because ideally, if your clients are getting together and they're talking about how wonderful of an experience they're having and how many results they have and how great of like a coach you are because of the experience they're having with you, then and the other person is having that same type of experience, then they're just going to hype you up, and then they're going to get more excited. They're going to bring that energy to your coaching calls. They're going to bring that energy to bringing you new clients, and that should like build the program. If it's doing the opposite, then there's something fundamentally wrong with how you're coaching or how you're leading, and that's something that you should address.
Yeah, I think that like it may have been the retreat from hell, like truly the retreat from hell. The way that everything went was berserk. And there's so much more that we could dive into, but we aren't, because ultimately the goal of us talking about this, and we were very nervous to even consider this to be something that we talked about on this podcast, but I think it's so critical because if we hadn't gone through what we went through on that retreat, if we hadn't gone through what we went through in that program, this podcast would not exist. We would not
Yeah.
know each other.
Right.
And so I think that like that's so important. And we're not here to lay blame, but this is a space to do some reflection, to do some thinking about, as a person of color, one, what are things that you may be accepting that are causing you misalignment and unease that could be addressed to make the environment that you're in better, not just for yourself, but for others. Because even if I exited that program, and I mean, I did, like, I exited the program, but I had said something like, it could make it better for someone else. Same with like Brianna, but like also, we're not here to be like, oh, all white coaches are bad, or even this particular coach was bad. Because I will admit, and I already said it, like I got a lot of success out of my first 6 months, but I do, like, hindsight 2020, I don't think I should have resigned for that second round for a number of reasons outside of just like performance and business success and ROI. But I think that it's just so important for us to like really reiterate the fact that this isn't like a blame game, but we think, as we discussed, like, what are we going to talk about on this podcast? It was so crucial for us to be like, you know what, this is like the microaggressions we paid for. And again, we haven't dove into everything. We've kind of highlighted some pieces, but it's like, you just never know. And like Brandon said, if there isn't community and people aren't able to talk, like truly, 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 if you are a coach and you are scared about your clients talking to each other, there is a problem. And we were made to feel like it was a problem that we were talking to each other on this retreat. But I will say that connecting with Brianna and the other girls within the program is the one reason I do not regret signing up.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Like, if like the only thing that I got out of this was like our friendship and the connection that we were able to share, and like those late night talks that I really needed, both for like personal and business reasons, like that investment was worth it, even if like, it didn't work out
Yeah,
with that
nothing
coach.
to
And
do with the
like,
coach, everything to do with the
yeah,
people.
yeah. And like, I'll also say that like every coach isn't for every person, right? And so like outside of everything else, maybe it just wasn't a good fit, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. And like, I wish her the best. I hope that she's successful. I hope that, she continues to grow and be receptive to feedback, and really address some of those like things that were hopefully brought up and planted in her head over the retreat, and that it becomes like a really positive learning experience for her. Because like I said, I don't think she's a bad person. I just think that some of the choices that she made was harmful, and that's just the
That's
reality
what it
of
is.
my experience.
Yeah, I think they're ready for a heart check, Brianna.
Yeah. Okay, guys. So let's just really zero back in. Microaggressions. They're anything, whether you're intentionally doing it or not, that is harmful to another person. And it's important for us to stay accountable, to get curious, to ask questions. And it's also important for us, if we're experiencing those microaggressions, to evaluate the places that we're being in, whether how those places make us feel, and recognizing that you can choose to call it out or you can choose not to, but even if you're silent, that doesn't make what's happening okay. And so for our heart check today, I want, for our women of color and our Black women, I want you to reflect and think about, when is the last time you felt silenced or dismissed in a space that claimed to be safe? How did that make you feel? What did you do? What do you wish you could have done? And how can you address those things? Does that mean having a conversation with whoever was in charge of that space? Does that mean removing yourself from the space altogether? Does that mean just sharing your experience with a safe person in your life to have that validation that, hey, this happened and it hurt me, and being able to reflect? I want you to do that. If you're a white coach or listener, I want you to ask yourself, when's the last time you heard someone speak up and you chose not to lean in? and you chose not to get curious. And why is that? And ask yourself, like, was it the discomfort? Was it a reflection of the fact that maybe you've said the thing that that person spoke up against, or that that's something that felt really familiar to you? And because it felt familiar to you, when they called it out, it made you feel bad and it made you feel guilty. And so instead of, addressing it or doing some reflection, you got defensive. How can you do better next time? What conversations could you be having with people in your life who don't look like you, and addressing things that has hurt them, or that they've spoken up about, or that you've noticed? Kind of see what comes up for you. I think for both people, I think it would be also a really good exercise to ask yourself, what would it look like to say something the next time you heard something that felt out of pocket? Whether you're a Black person or a person of color or a white person, what would it look like? What are tools and resources that you can use to address it in a way that feels safe and comfortable to you, but lets other people in the room know that you don't accept that behavior, that you don't believe in that behavior? And how would it make those people feel? I think that's a really important piece, because when we think about the safety, the compassion, the excitement that those people might feel seeing you stand up for them, seeing you call out something that's wrong, I think that's almost an exciting motivator if it feels uncomfortable to you. And we're never going to do it perfectly every single time. There's no right or wrong way to address it other than violence. Don't be violent, please. We do not atone violence.
Bare minimum.
But there's no right or wrong way to do this. It's about being open, having conversations, and doing our best to do better now that we know better.
Yeah. And that's a wrap. We're 3 Black women and their white coach, and this conversation's just getting started.
Friends, thanks so much for joining us today.
We've loved getting to spend this time here with you, but don't let the conversation stop here. Drop us a message or connect with us on social media. All the details can be found in the show notes,
along with some great resources to help you on this journey of helping make the coaching industry more inclusive. Until next time, we're 3 Black women
and their white coach,
doing the work, holding the space, and building something better.